When the lightning struck her cabin, I saw it from my window, a brilliant flash reaching down from the clouds like a finger of God. I ran into the storm without thinking. Rain lashed at my face. Mud sucked at my boots. All I could think was one word. Please, please let her be alive. I found her huddled in the corner, blood running from her forehead, eyes unfocused. Callahan, she whispered. That was the night everything changed. The night I stopped being a ghost and started being a man again. Her name was Eleanor Mercer. And this is the story of how an annoying neighbor became the love of my life. 3 months from now, she would stand before me in a blue dress she had sewn herself, tears streaming down her face as she said yes to spending the rest of her life with an annoying man like me. She would laugh through those tears and call me impossible, and I would hold her face in my hands and wonder how a broken man like me had found something so beautiful in the Arizona dust. But on that first day when her wagon rolled onto the dried patch of earth 300 yards from my property line, I did not know any of that. I did not know that my life was about to change forever. I did not know that the copper-haired woman climbing down from that wagon would become the reason I wanted to live again. My name is Thomas Callahan, and I am not proud of what I am about to confess. I watched her every single day. I watched her more than any decent man should watch a woman who was not his wife. The Arizona Territory in 1882 was unforgiving land. It demanded everything from those who dared to call it home. The sun beat down without mercy. The wind carried dust that worked its way into every crack and crevice of your soul. Water was precious. Shade was a luxury. And loneliness was a constant companion for those of us who had chosen to disappear into the emptiness. I had been disappearing for 6 years. 6 years since cholera took my Catherine in 3 days. 6 years since I buried her behind our cabin in Missouri and then walked away from everything we had built together. 6 years since I stopped being a husband and started being a ghost. I came to Arizona to escape the memories. But memories, I learned, are patient travelers. They follow you across state lines and mountain ranges. They settle into the walls of your new home and whisper to you in the quiet hours before dawn. They remind you of promises you made and could not keep. Catherine wanted 4 children. She had names picked out for all of them. James and William for the boys, Rose and Emma for the girls. She had a 10-year plan written in her neat handwriting tucked into our family Bible. By 1880, we would have a real ranch. By 1880, we would have enough saved to send the children to proper schools. By 1890, we would sit on our porch and watch our grandchildren play in the yard we had built with our own hands. Cholera did not care about 10-year plans. I was 34 years old when Eleanor Mercer arrived, and I had spent the last 6 of those years going through the motions of living without actually being alive. I woke up, I worked my land, I tended my horses, I ate food that tasted like nothing. I slept in fits and starts, always reaching for a warm body that was no longer there. I had become very good at being alone. And then she appeared on the horizon, and everything changed. It was late spring when the wagon came. The desert flowers were struggling to bloom against the harsh sunspots of yellow and purple, fighting for survival among the rocks and dust. I was mending a fence post that did not really need mending, my hammer striking the wood in a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. I saw the wagon before I heard it, a dark shape against the bright sky moving slowly down the trail that led to the abandoned cabin on the property next to mine. The cabin had been empty for 2 years, ever since Old Man Peterson died, and his son in the city decided to sell rather than work the land himself. I had wondered who would be foolish enough to buy it. The soil was poor, the well was shallow, the nearest neighbor was me, and I was not exactly known for my hospitality. As the wagon drew closer, I realized it was being driven by a woman. Alone. No husband riding alongside, no children peeking out from under the canvas cover. Just one woman, her back straight and her jaw set, guiding 2 tired horses towards a life that would test her in ways she could not possibly imagine. I should have walked over immediately. That would have been the neighborly thing to do. A woman alone in this country faced dangers that kept decent men awake at night. Outlaws passed through, regularly looking for easy targets. The Apache occasionally raided settlements to the south. Wild animals did not discriminate between the homes of men and women. But I did not walk over. I stood there like a fool, my hammer forgotten in my hand, watching her climb down from the wagon with more determination than most men I had known in my 34 years. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves before they fall. Even from that distance, maybe 200 yards, I could see it catching the late afternoon sun like copper fire. She moved with purpose, her boots hitting the ground hard as she surveyed the property she had purchased. She did not look around for help. She did not seem to expect any. She simply began unloading her belongings, one piece at a time, a trunk that was clearly too heavy for one person, a rocking chair that had seen better days, boxes tied with rope, a rolled-up rug. Everything she owned in the world I realized fit in that single wagon. I watched her struggle with the trunk. She tried lifting it from one end, then the other. She tried pulling it. She tried pushing it. Her face grew red with exertion, but she did not stop. She did not cry. She did not look around hoping someone would appear to rescue her. She just kept trying. Something twisted in my chest as I watched. Shame perhaps at my own cowardice in not going to help. Or maybe it was the beginning of something else, something I was not ready to name. Something that felt like admiration mixed with curiosity, mixed with a warmth I had not felt in 6 long years. When she finally managed to drag the trunk through the door of the cabin, I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. That night, I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about copper hair and determination and the way she had refused to give up on that trunk. I thought about Catherine, who would have told me to go introduce myself immediately to bring food and offer help and make our new neighbor feel welcome. I thought about how Catherine would have been disappointed in me. The following morning, I gathered my courage along with a basket of eggs and some salted meat from my stores. It was an excuse, and I knew it. But I needed a reason to see her up close, to hear her voice, to know if she was as remarkable as she had seemed from a distance. The walk from my property to hers took 5 minutes. 5 minutes of rehearsing what I would say. 5 minutes of wiping my palms on my trousers and running my fingers through my hair and feeling like a nervous boy instead of a grown man. She must have heard me coming because she was standing in the doorway when I arrived. And for a moment, I forgot every word I had planned to say. She was beautiful. Not in the soft, delicate way of the women in the magazines Catherine used to read. Beautiful in a fierce way, in a survived something terrible way. Her face was thin with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that spoke of stubbornness. Her eyes were green, the color of new leaves in spring, and they studied me with careful assessment, like she was trying to determine if I was a threat or merely a nuisance. I cleared my throat. "I appreciate the kindness, Mr. Calloway," she said before I could speak, her eyes dropping to the basket in my hands. "Callahan," I corrected. "Thomas Callahan. I own the land just east of here." "Eleanor Mercer." She did not extend her hand. She did not invite me inside. Her green eyes studied me again, and I felt like a horse being evaluated at auction. "If you need anything, Miss Mercer, my door is always open." She thanked me, took the basket, and closed the door. Just like that. No small talk, no questions about the area. "No, please come in and tell me about my new home." I stood on her porch for a long moment, feeling foolish and dismissed and strangely more interested than I had been before. That was the end of our first conversation. But it was not the end of my watching. I told myself I was simply being protective. That was the excuse I clung to as the days turned into weeks and my observation became a habit. A woman alone in this country faced dangers that required vigilance. Someone needed to keep an eye on her to make sure she was safe, to be ready to help if trouble came. Someone. Not me specifically. Just someone who happened to be nearby, who happened to look in her direction several times a day, who happened to notice every detail of her routine with an attention that bordered on obsession. I noticed that she woke before dawn every day just like me. I would see the lamplight flickering in her window while the sky was still gray, and I would wonder what dreams had chased her from sleep. Were they like mine, full of faces that would never age and voices that had fallen silent? I watched her hang laundry on the line she strung between two posts. White sheets and practical dresses and undergarments that made my face burn when I realized I was looking at them. The fabric flapped in the wind like flags of surrender, and I thought about how long it had been since anyone had hung laundry on my line. 6 years. Catherine had done it the morning before she got sick. I watched Eleanor carry water from the creek that ran between our properties. The buckets were heavy, I could tell from the way her shoulders hunched under the weight, but she never made 2 trips when one would do. She was efficient with her strength in a way that suggested she had learned to be. I watched her tend the small garden she planted with seeds I suspected she could barely afford. She was on her knees in the dirt every evening pulling weeds and checking for pests and talking to the plants in the low voice I could not quite hear. Catherine used to talk to her plants too. She said it helped them grow. She said everything living needed to hear a kind voice now and then. And I watched Eleanor sit on her porch in the evenings, her face turned toward the sunset like she was searching for something that existed only in the dying light. Those were the moments that made my chest ache. Because I recognized that look. I had seen it in my own reflection for 6 years. It was the look of someone waiting for a pain that would never completely go away. 3 weeks after her arrival, something changed. I noticed that she never received mail. Not once did I see the postal rider stop at her cabin. No letters from family, no packages from friends, no correspondence of any kind. I noticed that no one came to visit her. In 3 weeks, not a single wagon had pulled up to her property except mine on that first morning. She had no friends in town that I could see, no relatives checking on her welfare, no former neighbors from wherever she had come from. She was alone in a way that went beyond geography. She was alone in the way that people are alone when they are hiding from something or someone. I noticed other things too, small things that added up to a larger picture I could not quite see clearly. She had a habit of touching her chest just below her throat when she thought no one was watching. Her fingers would reach for something beneath her dress, something hanging on a chain around her neck. She would hold it for a moment, her eyes going distant, and then she would shake herself back to the present and return to whatever task she had been doing. What was she holding? What memory was she carrying close to her heart? And there were the nights when I saw her lamp burning until well past midnight, pacing. I could see her shadow moving back and forth across the window, back and forth like a caged animal looking for escape. She could not sleep any better than I could. What kept her awake? What ghosts visited her in the dark hours? I wanted to know. God help me, I wanted to know everything about her. But I was too much of a coward to simply walk over and ask. So I watched from my fence line and my barn door and my window, telling myself I was protecting her, when really I was just hungry for the presence of another wounded soul. It was during the 3rd week that I made a mistake. I was pretending to check on my horse near the fence line that separated our properties. The horses were fine, of course. They were always fine. But they gave me an excuse to be close enough to see Eleanor attempting to repair a broken shutter on her cabin window. She was standing on a wooden crate that wobbled dangerously with every movement. The shutter was hanging by one hinge, and she was trying to realign it while holding a hammer and a handful of nails. It was a 2-person job. Anyone could see that. The smart thing would have been to ask for help. But Eleanor Mercer, I was learning, did not ask for help. I was so focused on watching her that I did not notice when she looked up. Our eyes were met across the distance, maybe 40 yards separating us, and I saw her expression change. The concentration faded, replaced by something harder. Frustration, annoyance, something that made my stomach drop like a stone thrown into a deep well. She set down her tools with deliberate care. Then she climbed off the crate and started walking toward me. Not strolling, not ambling. Walking with purpose, in every step her boots striking the ground, hard, her chin lifted in a way that suggested I was in trouble. I considered running. I am not too proud to admit that, but my feet seemed to have taken root in the Arizona soil, and all I could do was watch her approach like a man watching a dust storm roll in from the mountains. She stopped at the fence that divided our properties. Her green eyes blazed like emeralds held up to firelight. "Mr. Callahan," she said, and her voice was steady as stone. "I have something to say to you, and I would appreciate it if you would listen without interruption." "Yes, ma'am, you stare too much." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Direct, unvarnished, true. Every time I step outside my door, there you are, fixing fences that do not appear broken, checking on horses that seem perfectly healthy, finding reasons to be precisely where you can see whatever I am doing. My face burned with embarrassment. Heat crept up my neck and settled in my cheeks, and I knew I must look like a fool. Because I was a fool. "Miss Mercer, I meant no disrespect. I asked you not to interrupt." Her voice carried an authority that silenced me immediately. Here was a woman who was used to being dismissed, who had learned to speak with force because the alternative was not being heard at all. "I came here to start over." Her green eyes held mine, refusing to let me look away. "My husband died 2 years ago, and the life I had in Missouri died with him. I sold everything I owned to buy this land because I wanted to prove I could survive on my own. I do not need a man watching over me like I am a child who cannot be trusted. I understand I managed, though the words felt inadequate. Do you? She tilted her head, studying me, because I need you to understand something very clearly. I am not some delicate flower waiting to be rescued. I have buried a husband and a child. I have survived things that would break most people. What I need from my neighbor is respect, not surveillance. A child. The words echoed in my mind like a gunshot in a canyon. She had lost a child. The information hit me like cold water, and suddenly I saw her differently. The sadness I had noticed in her quiet moments. The way she sometimes stared at nothing, her eyes focused on a point that did not exist in the present. The loneliness that seemed to surround her like morning mist. She was not just a widow, she was a mother who had outlived her baby. I know that pain. I know the way it burrows into your bones and makes a home there. I never had children with Catherine. We were waiting, saving money, making plans. But I had wanted them. I had dreamed of them. And when Catherine died, those dreams died with her. Eleanor had actually held her child, had actually watched that child take first steps and speak first words, had actually felt the weight of that small body in her arms. And then she had buried what she loved most. I apologize, Miss Mercer. I spoke more quietly now, the embarrassment replaced by something deeper. Something like grief shared between two people who understood what loss truly meant. Truly, I was wrong, and I will keep my distance. She studied me for a long moment. I watched something shift in her expression, the hardness softening just a fraction. She was not used to men apologizing. That much was clear. She was used to men making excuses, deflecting blame, refusing to admit fault. I did not say I wanted you gone completely. Her voice lost some of its edge. Just that I want to be seen as a person, not a problem to be solved. Then she turned and walked back to her cabin, her copper hair catching the afternoon sun, leaving me standing at the fence with shame burning through my veins. I kept my word for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of forcing myself to focus on my own land, my own chores, my own empty life. 2 weeks of not looking toward her property, not wondering what she was doing, not caring whether she was struggling. It nearly drove me mad. I would be in the middle of a task mucking out the horse stalls or repairing a leak in my roof, and I would find my mind wandering to her. Was she getting enough to eat? Had she figured out how to fix that shutter? Was anyone bothering her in town when she went for supplies? At night, I lay awake and thought about the child she had mentioned. What was the child's name? A boy or a girl? How old when they died? What sickness had taken them? I knew I had no right to these questions. She had made it clear that she did not want my attention. But grief has a way of recognizing itself in others. It calls out across the distance between people and asks to be shared. I wanted to know her story, not because I was nosy, because I understood in a way that few people could what it meant to carry the weight of the dead. On the 15th day of my self-imposed exile, a storm rolled in from the mountains. I had been watching the sky all afternoon, the way the clouds piled up against the peaks like gray cotton, waiting to burst. The air changed, growing heavy with moisture and electricity. My horses paced nervously in their stalls, sensing what was coming before any human could. This was going to be a bad one. I could feel it in my bones, the same way old man Peterson used to predict weather with his aching joints. The storms that came down from those mountains were not gentle. They were violent and unpredictable, capable of washing away roads and flattening structures and killing anyone foolish enough to be caught in the open. I thought about Eleanor alone in her cabin, the roof she had patched, the shutter she had repaired, the walls that had been standing empty for 2 years before she arrived. Would they hold against what was coming? I told myself it was not my concern. She had made it clear that she did not want my protection. She was a grown woman capable of making her own decisions, and one of those decisions was to live without my interference. But as the first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy and cold, I found myself standing at my window looking toward her cabin. The storm hit like a living thing. Rain fell in sheets so thick I could barely see my own barn just 20 feet from the house. Thunder shook the walls until I worried they might crack. Lightning turned the world white for split seconds at a time, each flash followed by a roar that had seemed to come from the center of the earth. I had weathered plenty of storms in my years in Arizona. This was different. This was the kind of storm that old-timers shook their heads about and predicted disaster, the kind that changed the landscape, the kind that people remembered for years. When the lightning struck her cabin, I saw it from my window. A brilliant flash, brighter than the others, concentrated in one spot rather than spread across the sky. I watched it reach down from the clouds like a finger of God pointing directly at Eleanor's home. And then I heard the sound that followed. The sound of wood splintering, of structure giving way, of something fundamental breaking. I did not think. I simply acted. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and pulled it on as I ran out into the storm. The rain soaked through in seconds, plastering my clothes to my body, filling my eyes until I could barely see. The ground had already turned to mud, sucking at my boots, with every step trying to slow me down. I did not slow down. All I could think about was whether she was hurt, whether she was trapped, whether I would find her alive when I reached what remained of her cabin. Please, I prayed to a God I had not spoken to since Catherine's funeral. Please let her be alive. The cabin was worse than I expected. A portion of the roof had collapsed where the lightning struck, caved in like a broken promise. Rain poured through the opening, drenching everything below. I could see debris scattered across the ground, pieces of wood and roofing material, and possessions that had been thrown from the impact. The door was jammed. I threw my shoulder against it once, twice, feeling the wood give slightly each time. On the third try, it burst open, and I stumbled inside into chaos. Water everywhere, pooling on the floor, dripping from what remained of the ceiling, running in rivers down the walls. The furniture had been pushed and scattered by the force of the collapse. A chair lay overturned. The table had shifted several feet from its usual position. Broken glass sparkled in the intermittent lightning flashes. Eleanor. My voice echoed in the ruined space. No answer came back. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for one terrible moment before lurching back into a rhythm that felt too fast, too desperate. I found her in the corner. She was huddled against the wall, her knees drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold her body together through sheer will. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead, a thin red stream that mixed with the rain and dripped onto her dress. But she was conscious. Her eyes were open, though unfocused, staring at something I could not see. Miss Mercer. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands hovering over her shoulders, afraid to touch her without permission. Can you hear me? She blinked several times. Slowly, her eyes found my face. Recognition flickered there, followed by confusion. Callahan. We need to get you out of here. I kept my voice calm, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Can you stand? She tried. I watched her plant her hands on the floor and push, watched her legs tremble with the effort, watched her face go pale as her body refused to cooperate. Without asking permission, I slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. Then I lifted her, cradling her against my chest like something precious and fragile. She weighed almost nothing. When had she last eaten a proper meal? How long had she been surviving on scraps and determination and stubborn pride? I carried her out into the storm, shielding her face with my body as best I could. The rain lashed at us both, cold and relentless, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the warmth of her against my chest, the flutter of her pulse against my arm, the proof that she was alive. She was alive. My house was warm and dry, a shelter against the chaos outside. I kicked the door open and carried her inside, setting her gently in the chair by the fire. The flames had burned low while I was gone, but enough heat remained to take the edge off the chill. I retrieved clean cloths from my cabinet and knelt beside her chair. In the firelight, I could see the cut on her forehead more clearly. It was not deep, thank God, but it was bleeding freely. Head wounds always did. She watched me as I carefully cleaned the blood from her face. Her green eyes followed my movements with an expression I could not quite read. Wariness, yes, but something else too. Something that might have been gratitude, if gratitude could be mixed with reluctance and surprise. You were watching again, she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, rough around the edges. I was watching the storm. You saw the lightning strike, yes, and you ran to check on me. I paused in my ministrations, the bloody cloth held suspended between us. Our eyes met, and in that moment, with rain hammering against my roof and thunder rolling in the distance, something shifted between us. Would you have preferred I stayed home? A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. Just a flicker there, and gone. But I saw it. and it changed something inside me that I did not know could still change. No, she said softly. I suppose I would not have. The storm raged through the night. I gave her my bed, the bed that had not held another person since Catherine died 6 years ago. The sheets were clean. I had washed them just that week, but they had not been warmed by another body in so long that the fabric had forgotten what comfort felt like. I slept in the chair by the fire. Or rather, I sat in the chair by the fire and watched the flames and thought about the woman sleeping in my bed. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the need to check on her, to make sure she was breathing, to reassure myself that she was real and alive and safe under my roof. Sometime after midnight, when the storm had begun to ease and the thunder had faded to distant rumbles, I noticed something. Eleanor had shifted in her sleep, the blankets tangling around her body as she moved. And as she moved, her collar had pulled aside, revealing the chain she always wore. The chain that disappeared beneath her dress. The chain she touched when she thought no one was watching. I should not have looked. I know that. But the firelight caught the metal and my eyes followed it before my conscience could stop them. The pendant was a small circle of silver worn smooth by years of handling, and engraved on its face was a single letter, S. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind turning over possibilities. S for what? A name, a word, a memory. Then I remembered what she had said at the fence line. I have buried a husband and a child. The child. The letter must be for the child, a daughter perhaps, Sarah, Susanna, Sophie. She carried her baby's initial next to her heart every moment of every day, a weight she could not put down, a memory she could not let go. I understood that weight. I carried my own version of it, invisible but just as heavy. Something broke open inside me as I looked at that small silver circle. Some wall I had built to keep others out, to protect myself from caring again. It did not crumble all at once, but a crack appeared, a tiny fissure that would widen with time. I looked at Eleanor Mercer sleeping in my bed with her dead child's initial pressed against her skin, and I felt the first stirrings of something I had thought died with Catherine. Hope. Dangerous, foolish hope. In the morning, we surveyed the damage together. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and gleaming in the early light. But Eleanor's cabin was a ruin. Half the roof would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Everything inside had been soaked beyond saving. Her clothes, her books, her few pieces of furniture. She stood in the doorway of what remained of her home, and I watched her shoulders shake with silent grief. All the progress she had made, all the work she had done to turn that abandoned cabin into something she could call her own. Gone in one night of wind and rain and lightning. Stay with me while I repair it. The offer came out before I could stop it, before I could think about what I was saying, what I was implying, what the town would think if they found out. Eleanor turned to look at me. Her eyes were dry, I noticed. Whatever tears she had shed them privately. What she showed me now was composure, control. People will talk. Let them. She raised an eyebrow. You do not care about your reputation? I took a step closer, close enough that I could see the freckles scattered across her cheeks, the way the morning light turned her hair to molten copper. My reputation means nothing if you are sleeping in a ruined cabin. Stay in my home. I will sleep in the barn. When your roof is fixed, you can go back to ignoring me. She was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes searching my face for something. Sincerity, maybe, or ulterior motives. She had learned to look for tricks in kindness, I realized. Someone had taught her that lesson. Someone had made her believe that help always came with a price. Finally, so softly I almost missed it, she spoke. I was not ignoring you. My heart stumbled over itself. I was afraid of you, she continued. Her voice was barely a whisper, carried away almost instantly by the morning breeze. But I heard every word. Afraid. My own voice came out, rough, confused. I would never hurt you. Not that kind of afraid. She turned to face me fully, and I saw in her eyes the same loneliness I saw in my mirror every day. Afraid of what I felt when I saw you watching. Afraid because it had been so long since anyone looked at me like I mattered. Afraid because I buried my heart with my husband and my daughter, and I did not want to dig it up again. Her confession cracked something open inside me. Something that had been sealed shut for 6 years. I took a step toward her, then stopped myself. I did not want to spook her. Did not want to confirm whatever fears she harbored about men who got too close. I know about loss. The words came slowly pulled from a place I had kept locked away. My wife died 6 years ago. Cholera took her in 3 days. I came out here to escape the memories, but they followed me anyway. She did not say she was sorry. People who understood real grief knew that words like that meant nothing. They were sounds people made because they did not know what else to say. They were placeholders for emotions too large to express. Instead, she simply nodded. And in that nod was more understanding than I had received from anyone in 6 years. More acknowledgement of my pain than all the condolences and sympathy cards and pitying looks combined. She saw me, not the man I pretended to be strong and capable and fine, but the man I actually was, broken and lonely and barely holding together. What was her name? Eleanor asked. Your wife, Catherine. I had not spoken her name aloud in years. It felt strange on my tongue, like a word in a language I was forgetting. And your daughter, something flickered across Eleanor's face. Pain, yes, but also gratitude, I thought. Gratitude that I had remembered, that I had listened, that I had not pretended her loss did not exist. Sarah. She was 4 years old when the fever took her. 1 week after my husband passed. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. She had lost them both in the same week. Her husband and her child gone in 7 days, leaving her alone in a world that must have felt like it was ending. You have been alone since then. There was no one else to be with. My parents died when I was young. And my husband's family? She hesitated, and a shadow crossed her face. They did not want me to stay. There was something in the way she said it, something bitter and afraid. But I did not push. I had learned in my years of grief that stories come out when they are ready, not before. On. She looked at me for a long moment, and I looked back, and something passed between us that I could not name. An understanding maybe, a recognition of kindred spirits. All right, she said finally. I will stay, but you have to promise me something, anything. Do not look at me like I will break. I have been broken for a long time already, and I am still standing here. I nodded. I understood that too. We stood there in the ruins of her home, two people carrying the weight of their dead, and something began. Not romance, not yet. Something smaller and more fragile. The possibility of not being alone. That night, as I lay in the barn on a bed of hay that poked through my blanket, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Eleanor sleeping in my house. She was there 30 feet away, in the bed where I had slept alone for 6 years. I could picture her copper hair spread across my pillow, her thin hands folded on her chest, that silver pendant with the letter S pressed against her skin. Sarah. Her daughter's name was Sarah, a little girl who liked something so much that her mother wore her initial next to her heart every day, every night a reminder of what had been lost. I thought about Catherine, about the children we never had, about the names she had picked, and the plans she had made. I thought about Eleanor burying a husband and a 4-year-old girl in the same week, then packing up everything she owned and traveling hundreds of miles to start over in a land that offered nothing but hardship. And I thought about something else too, something that had been nagging at the back of my mind since our conversation. My husband's family did not want me to stay. What did that mean? Families took care of widows and orphans. That was the natural order of things. When a man died, his brothers and parents stepped in to help his wife and children. It was expected. It was right. But Eleanor had been pushed out, unwanted, forced to sell everything and leave. Why, somewhere in the distance, far to the east, I imagined a man asking questions about a copper-haired woman who had fled Missouri. I did not know who he was or what he wanted. I did not know that he had been searching for Eleanor since she left. I did not know that he was getting closer every day, following the trail of a woman who thought she had escaped. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the way I felt the approaching storm. Eleanor had not just come to Arizona to start over. She had come to hide. And whatever she was hiding from, I had a feeling it would not stay hidden for long. The morning after the storm, I stood in the doorway of Eleanor's ruined cabin and made a list of everything that needed to be done. Half the roof was gone, caved in where the lightning had struck like an angry fist from the sky. The beams that remained were splintered and unstable, dangerous to anyone who might stand beneath them. Rain had poured through the opening for hours, soaking everything below, until the wooden floor had begun to warp and buckle. Her furniture was ruined. The mattress had absorbed so much water that it would never dry properly, would only rot and grow mold in the Arizona heat. The chair where she had sat every evening watching the sunset had lost two legs in the collapse. Her books, maybe a dozen of them lined up on a shelf she had built herself, were swollen and illegible, their pages fused together into solid blocks. The morning light poured through the hole in the roof, illuminating the destruction with cruel clarity. I could see where her clothes had been hanging on hooks along the wall, now soaked and covered in debris. I could see the small kitchen area where she had prepared her meals, the stove knocked askew and the cabinet doors hanging open. I could see the corner where she had been huddled when I found her, a dark stain of blood marking the spot where her head had struck the wall. She could have died. The thought kept circling back to me, persistent and unwelcome. If the beam had fallen differently, if the lightning had struck a few feet to the left, if I had not seen the flash from my window. Eleanor stood beside me, surveying the wreckage of everything she had worked for. Her face was pale but composed, her jaw set in that stubborn line I was beginning to recognize. She did not cry. She did not curse. She simply looked, taking inventory of what had been lost. "It will take 3 weeks," I said, "maybe 4. I need to get lumber from town. New shingles, nails, hardware." She nodded slowly. "I have some money saved. Not much, but enough to cover materials. Keep your money." I did not look at her when I said it, afraid of what I might see in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or worse, suspicion about why a man she barely knew would offer to rebuild her home for free. "I have supplies stored from when I built my own place. Leftover lumber, extra shingles. It would just go to waste otherwise." It was only half true. I did have some materials left over, but not nearly enough to rebuild half a roof. The rest would come from my own savings, from the money I had been setting aside for emergencies that never seemed to come. I could not tell her that. She would refuse. So I told her a half-truth and pretended it was kindness rather than something more complicated. "Mr. Callahan," she began. Thomas the First corrected. "If we are going to be living on the same property for a month, you might as well call me Thomas." A pause, then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "Eleanor." I turned to look at her then, and something passed between us. Not understanding exactly. More like an agreement. A truce between two people who had been alone so long they had forgotten how to share space with another person. "Eleanor," I repeated. Her name felt different in my mouth than Miss Mercer had. More personal, more real. She held my gaze for a moment, then turned back to the ruined cabin. "I suppose we should start." The first week established a rhythm. I woke before dawn as I always did, but now the darkness held a different quality. There was someone else breathing in my house, someone else stirring in the room where I used to sleep alone. I could hear Eleanor moving around even before the first gray light touched the sky, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. She rose early because she could not sleep late. I understood that. Grief has a way of chasing you from bed, of filling your dreams with faces you cannot hold on to and voices you cannot quite hear. Better to be awake and busy than asleep and haunted. That first morning I walked to the house from the barn and found coffee already made. The pot sat on the stove, steam rising from its spout, and beside it was a cup laid out for me. Just one cup. She had already drunk hers. The gesture was small, but it struck me somewhere deep. 6 years since anyone had made coffee for me. 6 years since I had walked into a room that held evidence of another person's care. I poured myself a cup and took it out to the porch where Eleanor was sitting in my rocking chair, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of orange and pink. She did not speak. Neither did I. We just sat there, two strangers sharing the beginning of a day, and the silence felt more comfortable than any conversation could have been. After breakfast, I walked over to her property and began the real work. The damaged beams had to come down first. I climbed up what remained of the roof, testing each piece of wood before trusting my weight to it, pulling out nails and lowering the broken sections to the ground. The sun climbed higher as I worked, beating down on my back until my shirt was soaked through with sweat. Around mid-morning, I heard footsteps below. Eleanor stood at the base of my ladder, a canteen of water in one hand and a cloth-wrapped bundle in the other. "You need to drink," she said, "and eat. You have been up there for 3 hours." I climbed down and took the canteen gratefully. The water was cool, drawn fresh from the creek, and it tasted better than any water I had drunk in years. While I drank, Eleanor unwrapped the bundle to reveal biscuits she had made that morning, golden brown and still slightly warm. "I did not know you could bake. My mother taught me. She passed when I was 15. But before that, she made sure I knew everything she knew: cooking, sewing, preserving food. She said a woman needed to be able to take care of herself. Smart woman. She was. Eleanor's eyes went distant for a moment, focused on something I could not see. She died of consumption. Took almost a year. I watched her fade away a little more each day until there was nothing left to fade. I understood then why Eleanor had been so composed watching her cabin fall apart. She had already watched worse things crumble. A cabin was just wood and nails. A mother was something else entirely. I am sorry, I said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all I had. It was a long time ago. She shook herself back to the present, that distant look fading. Anyway, eat your biscuits before they get cold. I will bring lunch around noon. She walked back toward my house before I could thank her, her copper hair catching the sunlight like a flag waving goodbye. That night, after a dinner of beans and cornbread that Eleanor had prepared, we sat by the fire and did not talk. The silence should have been awkward. Two people who barely knew each other trapped together by circumstance with nothing to say and nowhere to go. But it was not awkward. It was peaceful in a way I had not experienced since Catherine died. I watched the flames dance and thought about nothing in particular. Beside me, Eleanor did the same, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes reflecting the orange glow of the fire. Eventually she spoke. I never thanked you properly. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the crackle of burning wood. For coming out in the storm, for bringing me here, for everything you are doing, you do not need to thank me. Yes, I do. She turned to look at me, and in the firelight her eyes seemed deeper than usual, holding shadows I could not quite see into. I have not had anyone do something like this for me in a very long time. I had forgotten what it felt like. What felt like being helped. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Being cared for, I suppose. Without being asked to pay for it somehow. The way she said it made something cold settle in my stomach. Without being asked to pay for it. What kind of help had she been offered before? What kind of price had been demanded? I did not ask. Instead, I said, you do not owe me anything, Eleanor. Not thanks, not payment, not explanations. You are my neighbor, and your roof fell in. That is all there is to it. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly something in her face softened. You are a strange man, Thomas Callahan. I have been told that before. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. I imagine you have. The fire crackled between us, and outside the wind whispered through the desert brush, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt like I might not be quite so alone. The second week brought changes I had not anticipated. Eleanor, it turned out, was not content to sit in my house and wait while I worked on her cabin. Every day she appeared at the work site, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back, ready to help. At first, I tried to discourage her. The work was hard and dangerous. The sun was brutal. There were tasks that required strength she did not have and skills she had not learned. She ignored every objection. I am not weak, Mr. Callahan. She had slipped back to formality in her irritation, her eyes flashing that familiar fire. I told you that before. I have worked harder than this in my life, and I will not sit in your house like some kind of invalid while you repair the damage alone. There was no arguing with her. I learned that quickly. Eleanor Mercer had opinions, and those opinions were not subject to debate. So I taught her what I could. I taught her how to measure lumber and mark it for cutting. I taught her how to drive nails straight the way my father had taught me when I was a boy. I taught her which tools to use for which tasks and how to handle them safely and what to do if something went wrong. She was a quick learner. More than that, she was determined in a way that bordered on stubborn. When she made a mistake, she did not get frustrated or give up. She simply studied what had gone wrong, adjusted her approach, and tried again. By the end of the second week, she could frame a window as well as any man I knew. Working beside her changed something between us. The formality began to fade, replaced by an easy rhythm of cooperation. She would hand me tools before I asked for them. I would steady the ladder when she climbed up to check my work. We moved around each other like dancers who had practiced the same steps for years. And we talked. Not about anything important at first, just the small things that fill the spaces between people. The weather, the quality of the lumber, the way the desert changed colors as the sun moved across the sky. But gradually, as the days passed and the work progressed, the conversations grew deeper. You said your wife wanted 4 children. Eleanor was holding a board steady while I nailed it into place, her arms straining with the effort. Did you want them to? The question caught me off guard. Catherine and I had not talked about our private hopes with anyone outside our marriage. But somehow telling Eleanor felt different. Safe. I did. I drove another nail focusing on the familiar motion. 2 boys and 2 girls. James and William and Rose and Emma. Catherine picked the names. She had the whole thing planned out. First we would have the boys because she wanted older brothers to protect the girls. Then the girls would come along and the boys would teach them to ride and fish and climb trees. It sounds like a good plan. It was. I paused the hammer heavy in my hand. We were going to start trying the spring after she got sick. We had finally saved enough money. We had finally found the right piece of land. Everything was ready. And then it was not. I did not have to explain what she meant. She understood without words. That night by the fire, Eleanor told me about Sarah. She was the most stubborn child you ever met. Eleanor's voice was soft with memory, her eyes fixed on the flames. From the moment she could walk, she wanted to go everywhere. See everything, touch everything. I could not turn my back for a second without her getting into some kind of trouble. I smiled despite myself. Sounds exhausting. It was. Eleanor smiled too, but hers was tinged with sorrow. Beautifully exhausting. She would wear me out completely, and then at night she would crawl into my lap and fall asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I would think that I had never been so tired or so happy in my entire life. What did she look like? Like her father, mostly. Dark hair, dark eyes. But she had my stubbornness, my temper. Charles used to say that was the worst possible combination, that we were going to have trouble when she got older. Eleanor's hand moved to her chest, fingers finding the chain beneath her dress. She held the pendant there, the small silver circle with the letter S, and I watched her face change as she traveled back to a place I could not follow. She loved flowers, Eleanor continued. Every morning she would run outside to check the garden, to see which ones had bloomed overnight. She called them her friends. She would talk to them, give them names, tell them stories. I thought about the garden Eleanor had planted at her cabin, the one that was now destroyed along with everything else. When she got sick, Eleanor's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She asked me if the flowers would be sad when she stopped visiting them. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up toward the ceiling. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, a lonely sound that echoed across the empty desert. What did you tell her? I told her that flowers do not get sad, that they just keep growing and blooming no matter what happens. I told her that every time I saw a flower, I would think of her, and that would be like her visiting them even when she could not be there. Eleanor looked at me, then her green eyes bright with tears she was not quite letting fall. I have not told anyone that story before. Not ever. I did not know what to say, so I did not say anything. I just reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She did not pull away. My hand found hers on the arm of her chair. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly, but they curled around mine with a grip that spoke of need, of loneliness, of 2 people reaching for each other across years of grief. We sat there in the firelight holding hands, not speaking, and something shifted between us. Some wall that had been standing solid began to show cracks. The next morning I woke in the barn to find something waiting for me outside the door. My boots. I had left them on the porch of the house the night before, caked with mud from a trip to the creek. I had meant to clean them this morning before starting work, but someone had already done it. The leather was spotless, wiped clean of every trace of mud. The laces were straight. Someone had even rubbed a bit of oil into the leather to keep it from cracking in the dry desert air. I stood there for a long moment, holding my boots, feeling something shift in my chest. A small thing, a tiny thing. Just boots cleaned overnight by hands that had been caring for themselves alone for 2 years. But it was not small, not to me. I had forgotten what it felt like to be thought of, to have someone notice a need and fill it without being asked, to walk into a morning and find evidence that another person had been thinking about me. Catherine used to do things like this. Leave my coffee cup by the stove so it would be warm when I poured. Mend the small tears in my shirts before I noticed them. Place wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill because she knew I liked looking at them. For 6 years, there had been no one to notice, no one to care, no one to leave small signs of affection scattered through my days. I put on my boots and walked toward the house. And when I saw Eleanor on the porch with her cup of coffee, I did not mention the boots. Neither did she. But I saw the way she looked at them, and I saw the smallest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. The work on the cabin progressed faster than I had expected. By the end of the second week, the new beams were in place, and I had begun laying the fresh shingles. Eleanor worked beside me every day now, her hands growing calloused and her skin browning under the relentless sun. She did not complain. She did not slow down. She matched me hour for hour, and sometimes I found myself pushing harder just to keep up with her. We talked as we worked, about everything and nothing, about the way the light changed over the mountains in the evening, about the best way to preserve vegetables for winter, about books we had read and places we had dreamed of visiting. She had wanted to see the ocean, she told me one afternoon. Charles had promised to take her after Sarah was born. They were going to travel to California to stand on the beach and watch the waves roll in from the other side of the world. They never got the chance. I had wanted to build a mill, I told her in return. Catherine and I had talked about it for years, a lumber mill to provide wood for all the homesteads going up in the territory. We had even picked out a location, a spot by the river where the water ran fast enough to power a wheel. That dream had died with her. We traded griefs like currency, each confession met with understanding rather than pity. She told me about the day Charles died, about the way the light had faded from his eyes while she held his hand. I told her about Catherine's funeral, about how I had dug the grave myself because I could not bear to let a stranger do it. She told me about the year after Sarah's death, about the way the world had turned gray and colorless, about how she had stopped eating and stopped sleeping and stopped caring whether she lived or died. I told her about the first winter alone, about the nights I spent staring at Catherine's rocking chair, about the morning I woke up and realized I could not remember the exact sound of her laugh. We told each other things we had never told anyone, and in the telling, something began to heal. One evening as we sat on my porch watching the sun set, Eleanor spoke her name for the first time since the night she arrived. Thomas, she said, and the words sent a shiver down my spine. Eleanor, thank you. I told you before, you do not have to thank me. I know. She turned to look at me, her green eyes catching the fading light. But I want you to understand what it means. What you have done, not just the cabin. Everything. I waited. I came here thinking I would be alone forever. That I deserved to be alone. That after everything I lost, the best I could hope for was survival. Existing day after day until eventually the days ran out. She paused and I saw her fingers move to the pendant beneath her dress. The letter S, Sarah's legacy. But you make me think maybe there is something else. Something more than just surviving. And I do not know if I am ready for that, but I know that I am grateful. Grateful that you stared too much. Grateful that you ran out into the storm. Grateful that you are here. I did not know what to say. Words seemed too small for what I was feeling. So instead I reached out and took her hand the way I had that night by the fire. Her fingers threaded through mine, warm and solid and real. We watched the sunset together, and neither of us spoke, and the silence said everything that words could not. The day I went into town to buy more supplies, everything changed. I needed more nails. The roof was nearly finished, but the last section required hardware I did not have. I thought about sending the word to the general store and having the supplies delivered, but the truth was I needed to get away for a few hours, to clear my head, to think about what was happening between Eleanor and me without her standing right there beside me. Willow Creek was a small town, barely more than a main street, with a handful of buildings clustered around it. A general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, a telegraph office, a blacksmith, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where gossip traveled faster than wind, and secrets did not stay secret for long. I tied my horse outside the general store and went inside, nodding to old Mrs. Patterson behind the counter. She had been running this store since before I arrived in Arizona, a tiny woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Mr. Callahan, she peered at me over her spectacles. We do not see you much these days. Been busy, so I hear. Her tone was neutral, but I caught the slight raise of her eyebrow. Word travels even out here in the middle of nowhere. I collected my nails and paid without further conversation, but as I walked out the door, I heard Mrs. Patterson speaking to another customer. That widow from Missouri, she was saying, the one who moved into the Peterson place. I hear she is staying with the Callahan man now, just the two of them alone out there. I kept walking, my jaw tight. At the saloon, I stopped for a drink, just one to settle my nerves before the ride home. The room was dim and mostly empty, just a few old-timers playing cards in the corner and the bartender wiping glasses behind the bar. I took my whiskey to a table by the window where I could watch the street while I drank. And that is when I heard the conversation that would keep me awake for nights to come. Two men sat at the table behind me, strangers by the look of them. Their clothes were dusty from travel, their voices low but not quite low enough. You hear about the woman from Missouri, the one asking questions about, yeah, red hair, moved in a few months back. What about her? There is a man looking for her. My hand tightened on my glass. What kind of man? Brother-in-law, supposedly. From back east. He has been asking around at the stations following her trail, says she owes him something. What kind of something? I did not catch that part. But whoever he is, he sounds serious, real serious. The men moved on to other topics, but I was no longer listening. My mind was racing, putting pieces together that I had not known were scattered. Eleanor had never talked much about her husband's family. She had mentioned once that they did not want her to stay, but I had not pressed for details. Now I wondered what I had missed. Who was looking for her? What did he want, and why had she traveled all the way to Arizona to escape him? I finished my whiskey and walked out into the afternoon sun, but the brightness could not touch the cold that had settled in my stomach. The ride home took 2 hours, and I spent every minute of it thinking. Eleanor had secrets. I had known that from the beginning, but I had assumed they were the ordinary secrets of grief, the private shames that everyone carries when they lose someone they love. I had not considered that she might be running from something more concrete, someone more dangerous. A brother-in-law, following her trail, saying she owed him something. What could she possibly owe that would make a man track her across 3 states? By the time I reached my property, the sun was beginning to set. I could see Eleanor on the porch of my house, her silhouette outlined against the orange sky. She stood when she saw me coming, her hand raised to shield her eyes from the glare. Thomas, she walked down the steps to meet me as I dismounted. Did you get the nails? I did. I tied the horse to the post and retrieved the package from my saddlebag. Eleanor, I need to ask you something. Her expression shifted. Wariness crept into her eyes, replacing the warmth that had been growing there over the past weeks. What is it? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just ask directly, to demand the truth about who was looking for her and why. But another part, the part that had been holding her hand by the fire and watching sunsets and falling into something I was not ready to name, that part wanted to give her the chance to tell me on her own. Is there anything you have not told me? I asked finally. Anything about why you left Missouri? Anything about your husband's family? The color drained from her face. Why are you asking? I heard something in town about someone looking for you. For a long moment, she did not speak. She just stood there, her hands hanging at her sides, her green eyes fixed on mine with an expression I could not read. Then she said, "We need to talk." We sat at my kitchen table, the lamplight casting shadows across her face. Eleanor had poured us each a cup of coffee, though neither of us was drinking. The cups sat between us like markers on a map defining the distance that still remained, despite everything we had shared. His name is Victor, she began. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling slightly in her lap. He is Charles's older brother. I waited. Charles was the youngest son. Victor was the oldest. When their father died, he left the family farm to Charles instead of Victor. The old man thought Victor was too wild, too reckless. He wanted the land to go to someone who would take care of it. That must have caused problems. It did. Victor was furious. He thought the farm was rightfully his, that he had earned it by being the firstborn. He and Charles did not speak for 2 years after the reading of the will. Eleanor's fingers moved to the pendant at her chest, the silver circle, the letter S. When Charles and I got married, Victor started coming around again. He said he wanted to make peace, to be part of his brother's family. I did not trust him, but Charles wanted to believe the best in people. He invited Victor to dinner. Let him spend time with Sarah. Her voice caught on her daughter's name. Sarah loved him. Eleanor continued softer now. He would bring her presents, little toys and ribbons. He knew how to charm a 4-year-old. He knew how to charm everyone. But not you, no, not me. I saw something in his eyes that Charles could not see, Something cold, something calculating. But every time I tried to talk to Charles about it, he told me I was being paranoid, that Victor had changed, that family was family. What happened? Charles got sick first. The fever came on fast, and within a week he was gone. I barely had time to grieve before Sarah started showing symptoms. Eleanor's hands were shaking harder now. I wanted to reach out and take them, but something told me to wait, to let her finish. Sarah died on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was the day she and I always baked bread together. She loved kneading the dough. I'm sorry. After the funeral, Victor came to me. He said that now that Charles was gone, I needed a man to take care of the farm, to take care of me. He said we should get married. The word hung in the air between us. I told him no. Eleanor's voice hardened. I told him I would never marry him. That I did not love him and I did not trust him, and I would rather work myself to death than let him get his hands on my family's land. How did he react? Badly? Very badly. She finally looked up and I saw fear in her eyes. Not the old fear, not the remembered fear of a woman recounting past events, but fresh fear, present fear. He came to my house every day after that, demanding, telling me that a woman could not run a farm alone, that I was being foolish, that I was going to destroy everything Charles had built. And when that did not work, he started spreading rumors, telling people that I was unstable, that I had not been a good wife, that I had neglected Sarah when she was sick. He went to the bank and tried to convince them to foreclose on my loan. He talked to every potential buyer when I tried to sell the livestock. I felt my hands clench into fists beneath the table. He said that if I would not marry him willingly, he would make sure I had no choice. He would ruin me so completely that I would come crawling to him begging for help. What did you do? I sold the farm. Eleanor's chin lifted, a flash of the defiance I had seen in her from the beginning. I sold it for less than it was worth because Victor had scared away anyone who might have paid a fair price. And then I took the money and I left. I came here, as far away as I could get. And Victor, he swore he would find me. He said I had stolen what belonged to him, that the farm should have been his inheritance. He said he would track me down and make me pay for what I had taken. Her eyes met mine across the table. That is who is looking for me, Thomas. That is what I have been running from. And I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid you would not want to help me. Afraid you would think I was too much trouble. Afraid that I would have to run again. I did not know what to say, so I stood up and walked around the table to where she was sitting, and I knelt down beside her chair. Listen to me. I took her hands in mine. They were cold and shaking, but they gripped my fingers like I was the only solid thing in a world made of sand. I do not care what Victor Mercer thinks you owe him. I do not care what lies he has spread or what threats he has made. You are not running anymore. Not from him, not from anything. Thomas, you do not understand. He will come here. He will find me. And when he does, he will make trouble for everyone who has helped me. Then let him come. She stared at me, her green eyes wide. You would do that. You would stand against him. For me, I thought about the empty years behind me, the loneliness, the going through motions without ever feeling alive. I thought about Catherine and the future we had planned and the family we never got to have. And I thought about Eleanor, the way she laughed, the way she worked alongside me without complaint, the way her hand felt in mine when we watched the sunset. I would do more than that, I said. I would do anything to keep you safe. Tears spilled down her cheeks, the first tears I had ever seen her shed. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do that for someone you have known less than a month? Because you are the first thing that has made me want to live in 6 years. Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. Because I am tired of being alone, and I think maybe you are too. She made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. I called you annoying. You were right. I smiled despite everything. I stared too much. I still do. But I will not apologize for it, because staring at you is the best thing I have done in longer than I can remember. Eleanor leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine. Her breath was warm on my face. Her hands held mine like they would never let go. I am scared, she whispered. So am I. I do not know if I am ready to love anyone again. Neither do I. But that does not mean we should not try. And I am still broken. in ways that might never heal. I pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. The green had deepened with tears shimmering in the lamplight like forest pools. So am I said. But maybe that is okay. Maybe two broken people can help each other carry the pieces. She did not answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to my forehead. Just the briefest touch, soft as a whisper, full of promise. It was not a kiss, not yet. It was something smaller, something tentative, a hand reaching out across years of darkness, hoping to find another hand reaching back. I held her while she cried there at my kitchen table in the lamplight. I held her and I let her tremble against me, and I did not ask for anything more. We had time. Whatever was coming, whatever Victor Mercer might bring down upon us, we would face it together. That night, after Eleanor had gone to bed in my room and I had made my way back to the barn, I stood outside for a long time looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, a man was hunting for the woman sleeping in my house. A man who believed she owed him something. A man who had sworn to track her down and make her pay. I did not know when he would arrive. I did not know what he would do when he got here. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not take her, not while I was still breathing. I looked toward my house where a lamp still burned in the window. Eleanor's shadow moved across the curtain, pacing back and forth the way she always did when she could not sleep. She was not alone anymore. Neither was I. And whatever came next, we would face it the same way we had faced everything else since that storm knocked down her roof and blew open a door between two lonely people. Together. The dawn was coming. I could see the first gray light touching the eastern mountains. Whatever Victor Mercer was bringing, I would be ready for it. We both would be. 3 days after Eleanor told me about Victor, Doc Henry Wallace rode up to my property with news that made my blood run cold. I saw him coming from a distance, his gray mare kicking up dust along the trail that led from town. Doc Wallace was not the type to make social calls. In the 5 years I had known him, he had only visited my land twice, both times because someone was injured or dying. So when I saw him approaching that morning, my first thought was that something had happened to Eleanor. I dropped the hammer I was holding and walked quickly toward the front of the property, my heart pounding against my ribs. Eleanor must have seen him too, because she appeared on the porch of my house, her hands shading her eyes against the morning sun. Her face was tight with the same fear I felt. Thomas. Doc Wallace pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted with the stiffness of a man who had spent too many years bending over sick beds. We need to talk. What is wrong? Is someone hurt? No one is hurt. Not yet, anyway. He glanced toward Eleanor, then back at me. But there is something you should know. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Eleanor had confessed her secrets 3 nights before. Doc Wallace held a cup of coffee that Eleanor had poured for him, but he had not taken a single sip. His weathered face was creased with concern. There is a man in town, he said, arrived yesterday on the stage from Tucson. He has been asking questions about a woman from Missouri. Red hair, came to the territory a few months back. I felt Eleanor stiffen beside me. What does he look like, I asked. Tall, thin, cold eyes. Doc Wallace shook his head slowly. Speaks politely enough, but there is something about him that does not sit right. The way he watches people, the way he asks questions like he already knows the answers and is just waiting for someone to slip up. Did he give a name, Victor Mercer? Doc looked at Eleanor. Says he is your brother-in-law, ma'am. Says he is worried about you. Says he just wants to make sure you are all right. Eleanor's hands were trembling in her lap. I reached over and took one of them, holding it steady. He is lying, she said quietly. He does not want to make sure I am all right. He wants to take everything I have. Doc Wallace nodded slowly. I figured as much. A man who is genuinely worried about family does not have that look in his eyes. He has been going around town buying drinks for people, asking about the new widow who bought the Peterson place, asking about the man who lives next door. He knows about Thomas. He knows you have been staying here while your cabin is repaired. Doc's expression darkened. He made some comments at the saloon last night, implications about what kind of arrangement the two of you might have. My jaw tightened. What kind of implications? The kind that ruin reputations. The kind that make good people turn their backs on their neighbors. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. Victor Mercer had not even arrived at my property yet, and he was already poisoning the town against us. What should we do? Eleanor asked. Her voice was steady, but I could feel her hands shaking in mine. Doc Wallace was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving between us. I have known you for 5 years, Thomas. You are a good man. Quiet, maybe. Keep to yourself more than most. But good, he turned to Eleanor. And I do not know you well, ma'am, but I know what I see. I see a woman who has survived something terrible and is trying to build a new life. I do not see someone who deserves to be hunted. Thank you, Eleanor whispered. My advice is this. Doc leaned forward. Do not give Victor Mercer any ammunition. Keep your distance from town for a few days. Let the talk die down. And if he comes to your property, do not let him provoke you into doing something you will regret. And if he does not go away, Doc Wallace stood up, leaving his untouched coffee on the table. Then we figure out another plan. But for now, just be careful. Both of you. After Doc left, Eleanor and I stood on the porch and watched his horse disappear down the trail toward town. I should leave. Her voice was so quiet I almost did not hear her. What I should leave, she repeated. Go somewhere else, California maybe, or up north, somewhere he cannot find me. No, Thomas. You do not understand. She turned to face me, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. He will not stop. He will keep coming, keep spreading lies, keep making trouble until he gets what he wants. And as long as I am here, you are in danger too. I do not care about the danger. You should. Her voice cracked. He has already ruined me once. In Missouri, after Charles died, I had friends. I had neighbors who had known me for years. And Victor turned them all against me with his lies. He will do the same thing here. He will make everyone in Willow Creek believe that I am some kind of fallen woman, and anyone who helps me will be tainted by association. I stepped closer to her, close enough that I could see the freckles scattered across her cheeks, the way her copper hair caught the morning light. Listen to me, Eleanor. I do not care what Victor Mercer says. I do not care what the town thinks. I do not care if every single person in Arizona territory turns their back on us. You are not running anymore. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you risk everything for someone like me? I reached up and cupped her face in my hands. Her skin was warm beneath my fingers. Because you are not just someone. You are Eleanor. You are the woman who called me annoying and was absolutely right. You are the woman who works alongside me without complaint and makes coffee before I wake up and tells me stories about her daughter by the firelight. You are the woman who makes me want to be alive again. Her tears spilled over, running down her cheeks and onto my hands. I am broken, Thomas. So am I. I do not know if I can love anyone again. I'm not asking you to love me. I am asking you to stay. To let me help you. To stop running and start fighting. She closed her eyes and I felt her lean into my touch. And if he wins, if he takes everything, then at least we will have tried. Together. For a long moment she did not move. Then slowly she opened her eyes and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Okay, she whispered. I will stay. 4 days later, Victor Mercer came to my property. I was on the roof of Eleanor's cabin, nailing down the last section of shingles, when I heard the hoofbeats. 3 horses moving at a steady pace along the trail from town. Eleanor was inside my house helping Martha Brennan, who had come by earlier that morning with fresh bread and an offer to help with the mending. Martha was one of the few people in town who had not believed Victor's rumors. Her husband Harold had worked alongside me on several occasions and they knew what kind of man I was. I climbed down from the roof and walked toward the front of the property, positioning myself between the approaching riders and my house. Victor Mercer was exactly as Doc Wallace had described. Tall and thin, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He sat on his horse with the easy arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him something, and he smiled when he saw me standing there. It was not a friendly smile. Good morning, his voice was smooth as oil. You must be Thomas Callahan. I have heard a lot about you. I kept my hands at my sides, loose and ready. Can I help you with something? I am looking for my sister-in-law, Eleanor Mercer. I understand she has been staying here. She is not interested in seeing you. Victor's smile did not waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Something dangerous. I think she should decide that for herself. We are family after all. I have come a very long way to make sure she is all right. She is fine. You can go now. Victor dismounted, handing his reins to one of the 2 men who had ridden with him. I studied them quickly. Hard men by the look of them. Hired hands, probably. The kind of men who did dirty work for dirty money. Mr. Callahan, Victor said, his tone reasonable and patient. I do not think you understand the situation. Eleanor left Missouri under difficult circumstances. She was not well. The grief had affected her mind. She made some poor decisions, and I am afraid she may have given you a false impression of our family. Is that so? It is. Victor spread his hands in a gesture of openness. I only want what is best for her. She is alone in the world, now that Charles and little Sarah are gone. She needs family. She needs support. She needs someone to help her make good choices. The door of my house opened, and Eleanor stepped out onto the porch. She had heard everything. I could see it in the set of her jaw, in the fire burning in her green eyes. Martha Brennan stood behind her, watching with wide eyes. Victor turned toward Eleanor, and his smile widened. Eleanor, dear, you look well. The Arizona climate seems to agree with you. Go away, Victor. Now, is that any way to greet your brother? Victor took a step toward the porch. I have been so worried about you. When you left without a word, I feared the worst. I thought perhaps you had done something drastic. I said, go away. Eleanor's voice was cold as ice. I had never heard her speak like that before. There was no fear in it, only fury. Victor's smile flickered. I do not think you understand your position, Eleanor. He dropped the pretense of concern, his voice hardening. You took something that belongs to me. The farm was supposed to be mine. Father promised it to me. And then you and Charles swooped in and stole it. I did not steal anything. The farm went to Charles because your father chose to leave it to him. That was his decision, not mine. His decision was wrong. Victor's face contorted with old anger. Everything should have come to me. I was the firstborn. I worked that land for years while Charles played the favorite son. And then, when father died, what did I get? Nothing. And what did Charles get? Everything. That is not my fault. No, Victor agreed. It was not your fault. But now Charles is dead and the farm is gone, and all that is left is you and whatever money you got from the sale. Money that should have been mine. I do not owe you anything. Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound. You owe me everything. You took my inheritance. You took my future. And then you ran like a coward instead of facing what you had done. I ran because you threatened me. Eleanor's voice rose. I ran because you came to my house every day and told me I had no choice but to marry you. I ran because you tried to destroy me, and I will finish what I started. Victor's mask of civility had slipped completely now. He took another step toward the porch, his hands clenched at his sides. You think you can hide out here in the desert with your new protector? You think this farmer can save you from me? That was when I moved. I stepped between Victor and the porch, placing myself directly in his path. You need to leave, I said. Now. Victor looked at me like I was an insect he was considering whether to crush. This is family business, Callahan. It does not concern you. She is on my property. That makes it my business. For a long moment we stood there, neither of us moving. Victor's hired men shifted on their horses, their hands moving toward their belts. Then Victor smiled again. That cold, calculating smile that never reached his eyes. Very well. He stepped back, his hands raised in mock surrender. I can see that Eleanor has found herself a champion. How touching, how romantic. He turned and walked back to his horse, mounting with easy grace. But this is not over, he said, looking down at me from the saddle. Not by a long way. You have something that belongs to me, and I will have it back, one way or another. He wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following close behind. I stood there until they disappeared over the rise, my heart pounding and my hands shaking with anger. Eleanor came down from the porch and stood beside me. He will be back, she said quietly. I know. He will not stop until he gets what he wants. Then we will make sure he does not get it. She looked at me, her green eyes searching my face. You do not know what he is capable of. I am starting to get an idea. That night, after Martha Brennan had gone home and the sun had set behind the mountains, Eleanor and I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. He was different when we were young. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the sounds of the desert night. Victor, yes. When Charles and I first started courting, Victor was charming. Funny, he would make me laugh with his stories and his jokes. I thought he was harmless. What changed? I think he was always like this underneath. He just hid it better. But after the will was read, after he realized he had been passed over, something broke inside him. The charm disappeared. The joke stopped. All that was left was the anger. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Charles never saw it. Even when Victor started coming around again, acting like he wanted to make peace, Charles believed him. He wanted so badly to have his brother back that he could not see what Victor had become. And I saw it. Every time Victor looked at me, I saw the hatred behind his smile. He blamed me for everything. For Charles being the favorite. For the farm going to him instead of Victor. For existing. That is not your fault. I know Eleanor's voice was tired, but knowing it is not my fault does not make him any less dangerous. He has had 2 years to let his anger fester. 2 years to convince himself that I am the enemy who ruined his life. And now he has found me. I reached over and took her hand. We will figure this out. How? She looked at me, and in the starlight, I could see the fear she was trying to hide. He will spread more rumors. He will turn the town against us. And if that does not work, he will find another way. Men like Victor always find another way. Then we will be ready for whatever he does. You make it sound so simple. It is not simple. But it is not impossible either. You survived losing your husband and your daughter in the same week. You survived starting over in a place where you did not know anyone. You survived everything life has thrown at you so far. You can survive this too. She was quiet for a long moment. I am tired of surviving, she said finally. I want to do more than just survive. I want to live. Then live. She turned to look at me, her green eyes bright in the darkness. I'll start by believing that you deserve to. I squeezed her hand. Start by accepting that what happened to you was not your fault. That you do not owe Victor Mercer anything. That you have the right to be happy. Happy. She said the word like it was foreign, like she had forgotten what it meant. I have not been happy in a very long time, Thomas. Neither have I. But maybe we can learn together. She did not answer. She just leaned her head against my shoulder and watched the stars, and I held her hand and hoped that I was right. Hoped that two broken people could find happiness in each other. Hoped that Victor Mercer would not destroy us before we had the chance to try him. The next morning, I rode into town alone. Eleanor had not wanted me to go. She was afraid of what Victor might do, what lies he might have spread overnight. But I needed supplies, and more importantly, I needed information. Willow Creek felt different as I rode down the main street. People who normally would have nodded in greeting looked away. Conversations stopped when I passed. I could feel eyes on my back watching, judging. Victor had been busy. I tied my horse outside the general store and went inside. Mrs. Patterson was behind the counter, as always, but her greeting was cooler than usual. Mr. Callahan, Mrs. Patterson. I picked up a basket and started gathering the supplies I needed. Busy morning. Busy enough? She did not elaborate, and I did not push. I could feel the tension in the air, thick as smoke. When I brought my items to the counter, she tallied them up without meeting my eyes. That will be $3.20. I counted out the money and placed it on the counter. Before I could pick up my basket, she spoke again. People are talking, Mr. Callahan, I know. They are saying things about you and that woman, the widow from Missouri. Her name is Eleanor. Mrs. Patterson finally looked up, her sharp eyes meeting mine. I have known you for 5 years. You have always been a decent man. Quiet keeps to himself, but decent. She paused. Whatever is going on between you and Mrs. Mercer is your business. But you should know that the man who is spreading those rumors is not what he seems. Victor Mercer. He has been buying drinks and making friends, but he asked Tommy Wilson to do something yesterday. Something that made Tommy uncomfortable enough to come tell me about it. My grip tightened on the basket handle. What did he ask? He wanted Tommy to ride out to your place at night, to watch, to report back on what he saw. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. Tommy is not the brightest boy, but he knows right from wrong. He told Mercer no. Did Mercer find someone who would say yes? I do not know. But if I were you, I would be careful. That man has plans, and they do not include your well-being. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Do not thank me. She looked away, her expression troubled. Just be careful, both of you. I left the general store and walked toward the saloon, my mind turning over what I had learned. Victor was not just spreading rumors. He was actively trying to gather information to find weaknesses he could exploit. He was playing a long game, and I was only beginning to understand the rules. At the saloon, I found Sheriff Daniel Cooper sitting at a table near the back. He was an older man, maybe 50, with graying hair and steady eyes that had seen too much violence to be easily impressed by threats. Callahan. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. I was hoping you would come by. You know what is happening. I know that Victor Mercer is making a lot of noise about his sister-in-law. I know he is trying to turn the town against you and Mrs. Mercer. And I know he is not telling the whole truth about why he is here. I sat down setting my basket on the floor beside me. What do you know about him? I sent a wire to Missouri after he arrived. Asked a friend of mine who wears a badge over there to look into Victor Mercer. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. The report came back this morning, and Mercer has a reputation. No convictions, nothing I can arrest him for, but there have been complaints. Widows who say he pressured them into selling their land. Orphans who lost their inheritances under mysterious circumstances. He is a predator, Callahan. He targets vulnerable people and takes what he can from them. Eleanor told me he wanted to marry her, to get control of the family farm. That fits the pattern. Cooper set down his cup. The problem is he has not broken any laws here. He is allowed to come to town. He is allowed to talk to people. He is allowed to make ridiculous claims about his family. Until he actually does something illegal, my hands are tied. What if he does something illegal? Then I will be ready. Cooper's eyes met mine. I do not like men like Victor Mercer. I have seen too many of them in my years wearing this badge. They think they can take whatever they want because the law cannot touch them. But sooner or later, they always go too far. And when Mercer goes too far, I will be there. Thank you, Sheriff. Do not thank me yet. Cooper stood up, dropping coins on the table for his coffee. Just keep your head down and do not give him any ammunition. If he comes onto your property, if he threatens you or Mrs. Mercer, you let me know. But do not do anything stupid. Men like him are looking for an excuse. Do not give him one. I rode home with the supplies and a head full of thoughts. Victor Mercer was more dangerous than I had realized. He was not just an angry brother seeking revenge. He was a practiced predator, someone who had done this before and gotten away with it. He knew how to manipulate people, how to twist the truth, how to make himself look like the victim while he victimized others. And now he had set his sights on Eleanor. I thought about what the sheriff had said. Do not do anything stupid. Do not give him an excuse. It was good advice, sound advice. But as I rode toward my property, as I saw Eleanor standing on the porch waiting for me, her copper hair catching the afternoon sun and her green eyes bright with worry, I knew that if Victor Mercer tried to hurt her, I would not care about advice. I would protect her, whatever it took. That night, I began teaching Eleanor to shoot. She had told me she hated guns, and I understood why. Guns meant violence. Guns meant death. Guns meant the kind of world where women had to defend themselves against men who should have been protecting them. But the world we lived in was not the world we wished for. It was a harsh land filled with harsh people, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and destruction was your ability to fight back. We stood behind my house where a line of empty bottles sat on a fence rail. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Hold it like this. I positioned her hands on the grip of the pistol, an old revolver that had belonged to Catherine. The same pistol that had sat in a drawer untouched for 6 years. Your dominant hand here, the other hand supporting from below. It is heavy. You will get used to it. Now look at the target. Pick one bottle and focus on it. Nothing else exists except that bottle. She raised the gun, her arms trembling slightly with the weight. When you are ready, squeeze the trigger. Do not jerk it. Squeeze it slowly like you are pressing down on something fragile. She squeezed. The gun roared. The recoil pushed her back a step. And 30 feet away, a bottle exploded into fragments of glass. Eleanor stared at the empty space where the bottle had been. I hit it. You hit it. She turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something fierce. Something strong. Show me again. We practiced until the sun went down and all the bottles were shattered. Eleanor's arms ached and her ears rang, but she did not complain. She just kept shooting, getting better with every round, learning to control the weapon that might one day save her life. Afterward, we sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. Catherine's gun, Eleanor said quietly. The one you gave me. Yes. Why did you give it to me? Why not keep it? I looked at her at the copper hair and the green eyes and the stubborn jaw that I had come to love without ever saying the words. Because she would have wanted me to. Catherine believed in protecting the people you love. If she were here, she would have handed you that gun herself. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. You loved her very much. I did. And I always will. But loving her does not mean I cannot also love someone else. The words hung in the air between us. I had not meant to say them. They had slipped out before I could stop them. Eleanor turned to look at me, her eyes wide. Thomas, I know it is too soon. I know we have only known each other for a few weeks. I know that Victor is out there and everything is uncertain, and this is probably the worst time to say something like this. But I need you to know, I need you to understand why I am fighting so hard to protect you. She did not speak. She just looked at me with those green eyes, and I saw tears beginning to form. I love you, Eleanor Mercer. I do not expect you to say it back. I do not expect anything from you at all. But you deserve to know that someone in this world loves you, that you are not alone, that whatever happens next, you have someone in your corner. She reached up and touched my face, her fingers soft against my cheek. What if I disappoint you, she whispered. You could never disappoint me. What if I cannot be what you need? You already are. You have been since the moment you called me annoying. She laughed softly, a sound like water over stones. Then she leaned closer, her forehead touching mine. I want this, Thomas. I want us. Whatever that means. It was not a declaration, it was not a promise, but it was enough. We sat there on the porch, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, two broken people taking the first tentative steps towards something new. And in my heart, I made a vow. Victor Mercer would not take this from us. Whatever he was planning, whatever he tried to do, I would stop him. Or I would die trying. The trouble came on a Tuesday evening when I rode into town for supplies and left Eleanor alone. She had told me she would be fine. She had the pistol, I gave her Catherine's pistol, loaded and within reach. But I should never have left her. When I returned an hour later, I found her sitting on the floor, the pistol beside her, a window shattered behind her. And she told me everything that had happened. She said Victor Mercer was not a shadow, and he had been watching, waiting, learning our patterns. She was in the kitchen when she heard the horse approaching. Not my horse. The rhythm was wrong, the hoofbeats too heavy, too slow. Someone who was not in a hurry. Someone who knew exactly where he was going and what he would find when he got there. Her hand found the pistol on the table before she even realized she had moved. The door opened without a knock, and he had been watching, waiting, learning our patterns. I was in the kitchen when I heard the horse approaching, not Thomas's horse. The rhythm was wrong, the hoofbeats too heavy, too slow. Someone who was not in a hurry, someone who knew exactly where he was going and what he would find when he got there. My hand found the pistol on the table before I even realized I had moved. The door opened without a knock. Victor stood in the doorway, his thin frame silhouetted against the fading light. He was alone this time. No hired men, no witnesses. Eleanor, dear. His voice was smooth as honey poured over broken glass. I hoped we might have a chance to talk. Just the two of us. Get out. Now, is that any way to treat family? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes swept the room, taking in the simple furnishings, the fire burning low in the hearth, the pistol in my hand. I see your farmer has been teaching you new skills. How touching. I said, get out, Victor. Or what? He smiled, and the coldness in that smile made my blood freeze. You will shoot me. Your own brother-in-law. The man who only wants what is best for you. You have never wanted what is best for anyone except yourself. Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound, hollow and cruel. Perhaps you are right. He began walking toward me, slow and deliberate, like a cat stalking a mouse. Perhaps I'm selfish. Perhaps I do want things that belong to me. But can you blame me, Eleanor? Can you blame me for wanting what should have been mine all along? The farm was never yours. The farm was always mine. His voice exploded through the small room, and I saw the mask slip completely. This was not the charming Victor who had fooled Charles. This was not the reasonable man who had spoken to Thomas at the fence line. This was the real Victor, the one who had haunted my nightmares for 2 years. Father promised it to me. He continued, his voice dropping back to that dangerous softness. When I was 12 years old, he took me out to the North Field, and he said, "Someday all of this will be yours, Victor. You are my firstborn. You will carry on the family name." And I believed him. I worked that land for 20 years. I gave my youth to that dirt. And then Charles came along with his pretty wife and his pretty daughter, and suddenly I was nothing. Suddenly everything I had worked for belonged to someone else. That was your father's choice, not mine. But you benefited from it, did you not? Victor was closer now, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. You got the house, you got the land, you got the life that should have been mine. And when Charles died, when you had the chance to make things right, what did you do? You sold it, you took the money, and you ran. I sold it because you gave me no choice. You had a choice. His eyes burned with old hatred. You could have married me. You could have given me what I deserved. But you were too proud, too stubborn, too convinced that you were better than me. I was never too proud to marry you, Victor. I was too smart. Something snapped behind his eyes. He lunged. I pulled the trigger. The gun roared in the small space, deafening, and Victor stumbled backward with a cry of surprise. But I had not aimed to kill. I had aimed to warn. The bullet had gone wide, shattering the window behind him, letting in the cold evening air. Victor stared at me, his face pale with shock. You shot at me, and I will not miss next time. My voice was steady, though my hands were shaking. Get out of this house, Victor. Get out and never come back. For a long moment, he did not move. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to decide if I really had the courage to pull the trigger again. Then he smiled, that terrible, knowing smile. This is not over, Eleanor. You think you have won something here tonight, but you have only made things worse. Your farmer cannot protect you forever. And when he is not around, when you let your guard down, I will be there. He backed toward the door, his eyes never leaving mine. You should have married me when you had the chance. It would have been so much easier for both of us. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness outside. I stood there for a long time, the pistol still raised, my whole body trembling. The cold air from the broken window washed over me, but I could not feel it. I could not feel anything except the pounding of my heart and the echo of the gunshot still ringing in my ears. I had done it. I had stood my ground. I had not run. But Victor was right about one thing. This was not over. Thomas found me sitting on the floor when he returned an hour later. I had not moved from the spot where I had collapsed after Victor left. The pistol lay beside me, still loaded, still warm from the single shot I had fired. The broken window let in the night air, and I was shivering, though I did not realize it until Thomas wrapped his coat around my shoulders. Eleanor, his voice was tight with fear. What happened? Are you hurt? I told him everything. About Victor coming to the house, about the things he had said, about the gun and the broken window, and the way he had smiled as he left. Thomas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled me into his arms and held me. You were brave, he said into my hair. You did what you had to do. I almost killed him, but you did not. You warned him. You showed him that you are not someone who can be pushed around. He will come back. Thomas pulled away just enough to look into my eyes. Then we will be ready. That night, Thomas did not sleep in the barn. He sat in the chair by the door, the rifle across his lap, watching the darkness outside with eyes that never closed. I lay in his bed, wrapped in blankets that smelled like him, and I watched him watch for danger. He loved me. He had said the words, and I had believed them. But it was not until that night, watching him sacrifice his sleep to keep me safe, that I understood what those words really meant. Love was not just a feeling, it was a choice. 1,000 small choices made over and over again. The choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The choice to fight when surrender would be safer. The choice to believe in someone even when believing seemed foolish. Thomas Callahan had made that choice. For me. A woman he had known for only a few weeks, a woman who had brought nothing but trouble to his door. And I realized lying there in the darkness that I had made the same choice. I loved him. I loved him in a way I had not thought possible after Charles died. I loved him for his quiet strength and his stubborn kindness and the way he looked at me like I was something precious and worth protecting. I loved him and I was terrified. Because loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. It meant opening yourself up to loss in a world where loss was the only certainty. It meant risking everything for something that might not last. But as I watched Thomas sitting in that chair, his profile outlined by the faint glow of the dying fire, I knew that some risks were worth taking. Some people were worth fighting for. And Thomas Callahan was one of them. The next morning, I found Thomas outside staring at nothing. His hands were scraped raw, the knuckles bleeding. The wall of the barn bore the marks of his fists, dents and scratches in the weathered wood. Thomas, I approached him slowly the way you might approach a wounded animal. What happened? He did not answer at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something I had never heard before. Something that sounded like shame. There is something I never told you. He turned to face me and I saw that his eyes were red, not from crying. Thomas Callahan was not the kind of man who cried, but from something else, something that had been burning inside him for years. The reason I help people, he said, the reason I stop for you, the reason I run toward trouble instead of away from it, you do not have to tell me. Yes, I do. He took a deep breath. Because you need to understand who I really am. What I really am. He sat down on the ground, his back against the barn wall, and I sat beside him. A year before Catherine died, I was riding home from town. It was winter, cold, the kind of cold that kills, and I saw a wagon by the side of the road. Broken wheel, a woman and a child stranded. I waited. I was in a hurry. I had supplies that needed to get home before dark. I told myself that someone else would stop. Someone closer to town. Someone with more time. His voice broke. I rode past them, Eleanor. I looked that woman in the eye and I kept riding. Oh, Thomas. 2 days later, I heard the news. They found them frozen to death by the side of the road. The woman and her little girl. Nobody had stopped. Nobody had helped. He looked at me then, and I saw the grief he had been carrying for all those years. That little girl was about Sarah's age, 4 years old. She died because I was too busy, too important, too convinced that someone else would take care of the problem. That was not your fault. Yes, it was. His jaw tightened. I could have saved them. 10 minutes of my time. That is all it would have taken. But I chose my convenience over their lives, and they died for it. Thomas, you cannot carry that guilt forever. Why not? He laughed bitterly. They have been dead forever. The least I can do is remember them. The least I can do is make sure I never make that choice again. I understood then. I understood why he had run into the storm to save me. Why he had offered to rebuild my cabin without asking for anything in return. Why he was sitting outside my door all night with a rifle in his lap. He was not just protecting me. He was trying to make amends for a sin he could never undo. You are a good man, Thomas Callahan. I am a coward who let a child die. Number 1. I took his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. You are a man who made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But you have spent every day since then trying to be better. Trying to help the people you could not help before. That is not cowardice. That is courage. He stared at me and I saw something shift in his eyes. Something that had been locked away for 7 years finally beginning to break free. How can you look at me and not see a monster because I know what monsters look like? I have lived with one for 2 years. And you, Thomas Callahan, are nothing like Victor Mercer. You are nothing like any monster I have ever known. He broke then, not with tears, with something deeper, a shuddering breath that seemed to come from the very center of his being, a release of pain he had been holding on to for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to let go. I held him while he shook. I held him the way he had held me the night Victor came, and I understood finally that this was what love meant. Not fixing someone, not saving them, just being there in the darkness while they found their way back to the light. 2 days later, I decided to leave. I woke before dawn, as I always did, but this time I did not make coffee. I did not sit on the porch and watch the sunrise. I packed my bag with the few possessions I had managed to salvage from my ruined cabin, and I wrote a note that I left on the kitchen table. Dear Thomas, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Please do not try to follow Bombom. I am leaving because I love you, because loving you means protecting you from the danger I have brought to your door. Victor will not stop. He will keep coming, keep threatening, keep destroying everything in his path until he gets what he wants. And as long as I am here, you are in his sights. You deserve better than a life spent looking over your shoulder. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness. You deserve someone who does not come with a monster attached. I am sorry for everything, for the trouble, for the fear, for making you care about someone who could never stay. But please know this, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Loving you taught me that I was capable of loving again, and I will carry that gift with me wherever I go. Be happy, Thomas. Build the life you deserve. And sometimes when you see the sunset, think of me. All my love, Eleanor. I did not make it to the door. Thomas was standing there blocking my path. The note crumpled in his hand. Were you even going to say goodbye? I thought it would be easier this way. Easier for who? His voice was quiet, but I could hear the hurt beneath the calm. For you, so you would not have to see my face when you walked away, for both of us. He crossed the room in 3 steps and stood before me, close enough that I could see the shadows under his eyes, the lines of worry carved into his face. You do not get to make that choice for me. Thomas, please try to understand. I understand perfectly. You are scared. You think that running will keep me safe. You think that if you disappear, Victor will forget about me and move on. Will he not? Thomas shook his head. Men like Victor do not forget. They do not move on. If you leave, he will follow you, and I will spend the rest of my life wondering if you are alive or dead, safe or suffering. Is that what you want for me? I want you to have a life without fear. I do not want a life without you. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I have been dead for 6 years, Eleanor, going through the motions, waiting for the end, and then you showed up with your copper hair and your stubborn pride and your broken heart, and you made me want to live again. You cannot give me that and then take it away. You cannot make me feel something after 6 years of feeling nothing and then walk out the door. I do not want to hurt you. Then stay. He reached out and took my hands. Stay and fight. Stay and let me help you. Stay and give us a chance to build something together. And if we fail, if Victor wins, then at least we will have tried. At least we will have had this, whatever this is, whatever it might become. I looked into his eyes and I saw everything I was afraid of losing. Everything I wanted but did not believe I deserved. Everything that love could be if I was brave enough to reach for it. I am so tired of running, I whispered. Then stop. He pulled me close and I let myself fall into his arms. Let myself believe for just a moment that maybe things could be different, that maybe 2 broken people could build something whole. I will stay, I said into his chest. I will fight. Together. Together. That night, Sheriff Cooper came to the property with news. Victor has been busy, he said, sitting at our kitchen table with the cup of coffee that Eleanor had poured. I have had my deputies watching him since he arrived. He has been talking to people all over the county, buying information, asking about your property, your schedule, your weaknesses. What kind of information? The kind that helps a man plan something unpleasant. Cooper set down his cup. He has also sent for reinforcements. 2 men from back east. They arrived on the stage this morning, more hired hands. Worse, these are men with reputations. The kind of men who do not ask questions about the work they are hired to do. When will they make their move? Soon, I expect. Cooper looked at me, then at Eleanor. Victor is not a patient man. He has been here too long already. The longer he stays, the more people start to ask questions. He will want to finish this quickly. What do you suggest? Keep your eyes open. Keep your weapons close. And if he comes on your property with those men, send word to my office immediately. Do not try to handle it alone. After the sheriff left, Eleanor and I sat on the porch and watched the stars. He is coming, she said quietly. Yes, tomorrow maybe, or the day after. Probably. She reached over and took my hand. I am not going to run this time. I know, whatever happens, I want you to know that I am glad I stayed. I am glad I chose you. I squeezed her hand. We are going to get through this. How can you be so sure? Because I have spent 6 years waiting to die, and now I have something to live for. That makes all the difference. She leaned her head against my shoulder and we sat there in the darkness, 2 people facing an uncertain future. But we were facing it together, and that was enough. The morning came too soon. I had not slept. Neither had Thomas. We had spent the night making plans, checking weapons, preparing for whatever Victor might bring to our door. Now, as the first gray light touched the mountains, we stood on the porch and watched the sun rise. It might be today, Thomas said. I know. Are you ready? I thought about all the mornings I had watched the sunrise alone. All the nights I had paced my cabin, unable to sleep, haunted by memories of Charles and Sarah. All the years I had spent running, hiding, surviving. I was tired of surviving. I am ready, I said. Thomas turned to look at me, and something in his expression made my heart skip. Eleanor, there is something I need to do. Something I should have done before now. What is it? He took my hands in his, and I felt them trembling slightly. Thomas Callahan, the man who had faced down Victor Mercer without flinching, was nervous. If today goes badly, he began, then stopped, started again. If something happens to me, I need you to know. Thomas, nothing is going to happen to you. Let me finish. His eyes held mine. I have spent 6 years pretending to be dead, going through the motions, waiting for an ending I did not have the courage to choose. And then you came along and everything changed. You made me want to be alive again. You made me believe that maybe the future could hold something other than pain. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. I love you, Eleanor Mercer. I have loved you since the moment you called me annoying and told me I stared too much. I loved you when you stood in the rain of your ruined cabin and refused to cremate. I loved you when you told me about Sarah and trusted me with your grief. I have loved you through every moment of these past weeks, and I will love you for whatever time I have left on this earth. Thomas, I am not asking you to say it back. He squeezed my hands. I am not asking for anything except this moment, this chance to tell you the truth before the world comes crashing in. I did not say anything. Instead, I rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, two wounded souls reaching for each other across years of grief and loneliness. Then it deepened, and I felt something unlock inside me, something that had been closed off since the day I buried Sarah, something I thought I would never feel again. Permission to hope, permission to love, permission to believe that the future might hold something other than pain. When we finally pulled apart, Thomas looked at me with wonder in his eyes. Was that a yes? That was a promise, I said. A promise that when this is over, when Victor is gone and the danger has passed, we will have a chance to build something together. Something real, something lasting. He smiled, the first real smile I had ever seen on his face. Not the guarded half smile he usually wore. A full smile, bright and warm and full of hope. I liked the sound of that. Me too. We stood there on the porch, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. The sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink. And for just a moment, the world was peaceful. Then I heard the hoofbeats, 3 horses coming fast. It had begun. Harold Brennan arrived first, his face red with exertion. They are coming, he said, swinging down from his horse. Victor and 2 men, I saw them leaving town heading this way. Martha sent me to warn you. Thomas nodded, his jaw tight. How far behind you? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Get inside, Harold. Eleanor, you too. No, I stepped forward. I am not hiding while you face them alone. Eleanor, this is not the time. This is exactly the time. I met his eyes. You said we were in this together. You said we would face whatever came as a team. Did you mean it, or were those just words? He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Fine. But you stay behind me. And if things go bad, you run. Promise me. I promise. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But there was no time for arguments. We could already see the dust cloud on the horizon, 3 riders approaching fast. Thomas handed me Catherine's pistol. Harold checked his rifle. We stood in a line before the house, 3 people against whatever Victor had brought. And we waited. Victor Mercer rode up to our property like a man arriving at his own coronation. He was flanked by 2 men I had never seen before. Hard men with hard faces and hands that rested too easily on their gun belts. These were not the hired hands he had brought before. These were professionals, the kind of men who killed for money and slept soundly afterward. Good morning, Victor called, reining his horse to a stop about 20 feet from where we stood. What a welcoming committee. I am touched. You need to leave, Thomas said. His voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Now, I am afraid I cannot do that. Victor dismounted, handing his reins to one of his men. You see, Eleanor has something that belongs to me, and I have come to collect. I do not have anything of yours, Victor. Do you not? He smiled that cold, terrible smile. What about the $5,000 you got from selling my father's farm? What about the life you stole from me when you convinced Charles to take what was mine? I did not convince Charles of anything. Your father made his own choice. His choice was wrong. The words exploded out of Victor, and I saw his mask slip. Beneath the charm and the smooth words, there was nothing but rage. Pure consuming rage that had been building for years. Everything I ever wanted was taken from me. By my father, by Charles, by you. And now you stand there on land you bought with money that should have been mine, and you tell me to leave. He shook his head. I am not leaving, Eleanor. Not until I get what I am owed. Then name your price. Thomas stepped forward. How much will it take to make you go away? Victor laughed. Oh, it is not about money anymore, Callahan. It stopped being about money a long time ago. This is about justice. This is about teaching Eleanor that she cannot run from her debts. This is about showing everyone what happens when someone takes what belongs to Victor Mercer. And what exactly do you plan to do? Victor glanced at his two men who had quietly positioned themselves on either flank. Their hands were on their weapons now. Ready? I plan to take back what is mine, Victor said, starting with Eleanor. And if you get in my way, Callahan, I plan to remove you from the equation. Permanently. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Then Thomas did something I did not expect. He lowered his weapon. All right, Victor. He stepped forward, his hands raised. You want Eleanor? You can have her. Thomas, I grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Trust me, he murmured so low only I could hear. And be ready. Victor's eyes narrowed with suspicion. You are giving up. Just like that, I am a practical man. Thomas kept walking forward, slow and steady. I know when I am outgunned. You have 3 men with weapons against 2 farmers and a woman. The math is not in my favor. I always knew you were smarter than you looked, Callahan. But there is one thing you should know. Thomas stopped about 10 feet from Victor. One thing I learned a long time ago when I was too much of a coward to stop for a woman and child stranded on the side of the road. What is that? Some mistakes can never be undone, but that does not mean we stop trying to make things right. Then Thomas moved. It happened so fast I almost missed it. One moment he was standing with his hands raised. The next he had grabbed Victor by the collar and spun him around, using him as a shield between himself and the 2 hired guns. The professionals drew their weapons, but they hesitated. Victor was in their line of fire, and in that moment of hesitation, the sheriff and his deputies rode out from behind the barn where they had been hiding since dawn. Drop your weapons, Sheriff Cooper's voice rang out across the property. You are under arrest. The 2 hired men looked at each other, looked at the 3 deputies with rifles aimed at their chests, looked at Victor, struggling uselessly in Thomas's grip. They dropped their guns. Victor screamed in fury. He thrashed and fought and cursed, but Thomas held him fast. You set me up. Victor spat. This was a trap. You set yourself up. Thomas's voice was cold. You came onto my property with armed men intending to do harm, in front of multiple witnesses. Even the best lawyer in the territory cannot get you out of this one. The sheriff dismounted and walked toward us, handcuffs in his hand. Victor Mercer, you are under arrest for attempted kidnapping, trespassing, and conspiracy to commit violence. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. As the deputies led Victor away, he turned to look at me one last time. His eyes were blazing with hatred. This is not over, Eleanor. You hear me? This is not over. Yes, Victor. I stepped forward, Catherine's pistol still in my hand. It is. He stared at me, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. Fear. Then he was gone, loaded onto a horse and led away by the deputies. His hired men followed their hands, bound, their dreams of easy money shattered. I stood there in the morning light, watching them disappear over the rise, and for the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. The wedding took place on a Tuesday in autumn when the Arizona sky was impossibly blue and the desert was painted in shades of gold and amber. We held it at the small church in Willow Creek, the same church where Thomas and Catherine had been married 10 years before. Some might have thought that strange, getting married in the same place where he had pledged himself to another woman. But Thomas insisted. Catherine would have wanted this, he said. She would have wanted me to be happy. And this church, this town, this is where I learned what love means. It feels right to come back here and learn it again. I wore a blue dress that I had sewn myself. Not white. White was for young brides, for women who had never been married before. Blue was for second chances, for hope reborn, for the color of the Arizona sky on the day I started my new life. Martha Brennan stood beside me as my witness. Harold stood beside Thomas. Doc Wallace sat in the front row, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief when he thought no one was looking. Sheriff Cooper sat in the back, his badge gleaming in the light that streamed through the windows. The preacher read the vows. Thomas spoke his promises in a voice that shook only slightly. And when it came time for me to answer, I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The farm in Missouri, Charles and Sarah, the fever that took them both in the span of a week, Victor and his threats and his hatred, the long journey west running from a past that refused to stay buried, and Thomas, the man who had watched me from across a fence line, the man who had run into a storm to save me, the man who had fought for me, believed in me, loved me when I had forgotten how to love myself. Do you, Eleanor Mercer, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I looked into Thomas's eyes, blue as the Arizona sky, steady as the mountains on the horizon. I do. The kiss that followed was soft and sweet and full of promise. The congregation cheered. Martha cried. Harold clapped Thomas on the back hard enough to make him stumble. And Eleanor Callahan, smiled for the first time in longer than I could remember. Really smiled, like I meant it. 3 months after the wedding, I planted a garden. Not vegetables, not the practical crops I had tried to grow when I first arrived in Arizona. Flowers, dozens of them, daisies and violets and sunflowers spreading across the patch of earth beside our cabin in a riot of color. Thomas helped me dig the beds. He did not ask why I wanted flowers instead of food. He already knew. This is for Sarah, I said, kneeling in the dirt with seeds in my hands. She loved flowers. She used to talk to them, give them names, tell them stories. She called them her friends. Thomas knelt beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Tell me about her, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the way Sarah laughed, that bubbling giggle that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. I told him about her first steps, how she had fallen down a dozen times before finally crossing the room to where Charles waited with open arms. I told him about the songs she used to sing, nonsense rhymes she made up herself about butterflies and rainbows, in a magical land where children never had to go to sleep. I told him about the last day, about holding her hand while the fever burned through her, about promising her that the flowers would not be sad, that I would visit them for her, that she would never be forgotten. And when I finished, when the words ran out and the tears fell freely, Thomas held me. She would have liked this garden, he said quietly. She would have liked knowing that her mother found happiness again. Do you think so? I know so. He pressed a kiss to my forehead. And I think Charles would have too. They loved you, Eleanor. They would have wanted this for you. I leaned into him, letting his strength support me. I miss them, I whispered. I will always miss them. I know, and that is okay. Missing them does not mean you cannot be happy. It just means you carry them with you wherever you go. I looked at the seeds in my hands. Such small things, such potential for beauty. I started planting. The following spring, Eleanor told me she was pregnant. I had suspected for weeks. The morning sickness, the fatigue, the way she smiled sometimes like she was holding a secret she could barely contain. But I did not say anything. I let her tell me in her own time, in her own way. She chose to do it in the garden. We were kneeling among the flowers, pulling weeds in the early morning light. The daisies had bloomed overnight, white petals reaching toward the sun, and Eleanor was talking to them the way she always did, telling them they were doing a good job, encouraging them to grow. Then she looked at me, and her eyes were bright with tears. I am going to have a baby, Thomas. The words did not register at first. They seemed to hang in the air, impossible and beautiful and terrifying all at once. A baby. In December, I think, maybe early January. I sat back on my heels, my mind spinning. A baby. A child. The family Catherine had dreamed of, the future I had given up on 6 years ago. Eleanor was watching me with uncertainty in her eyes. She was afraid I realized, afraid of how I would react, afraid that this news would awaken old griefs, old regrets, old wounds that had never fully healed. I stood up and pulled her to her feet. Then I wrapped my arms around her and held her close. "This is the best news I have ever received," I said into her hair. "The best news anyone has ever told me. You are not scared." Terrified! I pulled back to look at her face. "But that is okay. I would rather be terrified with you than safe without you." She laughed through her tears. "You are still annoying," she said. "I know. And you still stare too much. I know that too." She rose on her toes and kissed me. "I love you, Thomas Callahan. I love you too, Eleanor Callahan. Both of you." I placed my hand on her stomach where new life was growing, where the future was taking shape. All three of us. The baby came in December on a night when the stars seemed close enough to touch. We named her Catherine Sarah Callahan. Catherine for the woman Thomas had loved and lost. Sarah for the daughter I had buried in Missouri. Two names for two people who would never be forgotten. Two legacies joined together in one small perfect life. She had Thomas's eyes, blue as the Arizona sky, but she had my stubbornness. Even in those first days, she knew exactly what she wanted and was not afraid to demand it. "She is going to be trouble," Thomas said, cradling her in his arms while I rested in the bed we shared. "The best kind of trouble." He looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Thomas Callahan, who never cried. Thomas Callahan, who had spent 6 years building walls around his heart. "I never thought I would have this," he said quietly. "A wife, a child, a future. I had given up on all of it. And now I have everything I ever wanted, everything Catherine dreamed of for us, everything I thought died with her." He carried the baby to the window and held her up to the light. "Look at that, Catherine Sarah. That is the world. It can be hard sometimes, cruel sometimes, but it can also be beautiful. And you, little one, are going to see all of it, experience all of it, because your mother and I are going to make sure you have every chance we never had." The baby gurgled, reaching for the light, and I lay there in our bed watching my husband hold our daughter, and I thought about all the roads that had led us here. The grief, the loss, the running and the hiding and the fear, but also the hope, the love, the stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up seemed like the only option. Two broken people. That is what we had been when we met, shattered by loss, haunted by ghosts, barely surviving. But somehow we had found each other. Somehow we had built something new from the ruins of what we had lost. A home, a family, a future. It was not the life I had imagined when I was young and full of dreams. It was not the life Thomas had planned with Catherine or the life I had begun with Charles and Sarah. It was something different, something unexpected, something born from pain and tempered by time. It was ours, and it was beautiful. 5 years later, I would stand on the porch of our home and watch my daughter play in the garden I had planted for Sarah. She was 5 now with Thomas's blue eyes and my copper hair. She loved flowers just like the ants she would never meet. She talked to them and sang to them and gave them names. She called them her friends. Thomas would come up behind me and wrap his arms around my waist. We would stand there together watching our daughter chase butterflies through the sunflowers, and we would not need to say anything. Some things were beyond words. Some love was too big for language. The girl who had been called worthless, the man who had called himself a coward. We had found each other in the dust of Arizona. We had built a life from nothing but hope and stubbornness and the refusal to let the past define the future. And now, watching our daughter laugh in the garden, I understood something I had not known before. You cannot outrun grief. You cannot bury it deep enough that it stays down. You cannot build walls high enough to keep it out. But you can carry it. You can take the weight of what you have lost and let it make you stronger. You can honor the dead by living fully loving, deeply believing, fiercely in the possibility of happiness. That is what Sarah would have wanted for me. That is what Charles would have wanted. That is what Catherine would have wanted for Thomas. Not survival, life. Real, messy, beautiful life. I had been saved by a man who stared too much. A man I had called annoying. A man who had run into a storm to rescue a woman he barely knew. But that was not quite right, was it? I had not been saved. I had been chosen. And I had chosen back. Thomas came to stand beside me on the porch, his hand finding mine the way it always did. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Everything I said. Nothing. The way the light falls on her hair, the way she laughs, the way you still stare at me when you think I am not looking. He smiled, that full smile I had learned to love, the one that reached his eyes and lit up his whole face. I will probably never stop staring, he said. I know. It is annoying. Yes, you called me that once, the first time we really talked. I remember. Do you regret it? I looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that had come from years of squinting into the Arizona sun, at the gray that was beginning to appear at his temples, at the hands that had built our home and held our daughter and touched me with a tenderness I had not thought possible. Never, I said, not for a single moment. He leaned down and kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. The same kiss he had given me on our wedding day, the same kiss he gave me every morning when we woke and every night when we went to sleep. Some things did not change. Some love only grew stronger with time. I love you, Eleanor Callahan, he said against my lips. I love you too, Thomas Callahan. In the garden, our daughter laughed, chasing a butterfly through the sunflowers. The Arizona sun beat down on the land we had built together. And somewhere beyond the veil that separates this world from the next, I like to believe that Catherine and Charles and Sarah were watching, smiling, at peace, because the people they had left behind had finally found their way home.